Have you ever wondered what the worst punishments in human history might have been? As we delve into this chilling topic, we start our journey in the cradle of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia, where the Code of Hammurabi was etched into stone. This was not just a set of rules, but a brutal catalogue of punishments, where the principle of an eye for an eye was the law of the land. Imagine the public spectacle as a thief caught in the act would have his hand severed in front of a crowd. This was a society where justice was swift and brutal, a stark contrast to our modern notions of rehabilitation and reform. As we move westwards to ancient Greece, we encounter the equally harsh draconian laws. Named after Draco, the first recorded legislator of Athens, these laws were so severe that they were said to be written not in ink, but in blood, a loaf of bread stolen, a life taken away. There was no room for mercy in Draco's Athens. Once again, punishment was not just about retribution, but a public spectacle meant to deter others from straying from the path of righteousness. But it wasn't just physical punishments that were meted out. Exile and ostracism, being cut off from society, was a fate often considered worse than death. Imagine being banished, forced to leave your home and loved ones, never to return. From the sands of Mesopotamia to the stone buildings of Greece, these ancient civilizations laid the groundwork for how societies would deal with law and order. The concept of punishment was not just about justice, but also about maintaining social order and control, often through the most brutal means imaginable. As we journey forward in time, you'll find that while societies and civilizations evolved, their methods of punishment often became no less severe. From the ancient world to the Middle Ages, punishments have evolved, but not necessarily for the better. As we step into the Middle Ages, punishments become more gruesome, reflecting the harsh realities of life at the time. Imagine a time where justice was often served with a side of public humiliation and a dash of excruciating pain. Welcome to the Middle Ages, a period notorious for its brutal and often creative methods of punishment. Let's delve into some of the infamous medieval punishments that stood out in this era of malice. First, we have the rack, a device that personifies the phrase stretching it out. The accused was tied to this contraption by their ankles and wrists, and then, quite literally, stretched. The purpose? To extract confessions. The pain was unbearable, the damage often irreversible. It was not uncommon for victims to be stretched to the point of dislocation or even worse, separation of limbs. Next, we enter the realm of the wheel. Not just any wheel, but a large wooden one, designed for the sole purpose of breaking bones. Victims were tied to this wheel and then beaten with an iron rod until their bones shattered. It was a spectacle of brutality, meant to deter others from committing similar acts. Finally, we come to the infamous drawing and quartering, a punishment reserved for those guilty of high treason. It was a four-part ordeal, each more horrific than the last. The condemned were drawn, hanged, disemboweled, beheaded, and finally, quartered. The process was as gruesome as it sounds, with the intent to inflict maximum humiliation and pain. These punishments were not just about causing physical pain. They were public spectacles, designed to instill fear and enforce obedience. They were a stark reminder of the power held by the ruling class and the dire consequences of defying it. The Middle Ages were dark times indeed, but as we move forward in time, the punishments only become more refined. As we continue our journey, brace yourselves, for the evolution of punishment does not grow less grim with the passage of time. The Enlightenment era brought about revolutions in thought, but did it bring any relief from harsh punishments? This is a question that has puzzled historians for centuries. The Enlightenment era, spanning the late 17th to the late 18th century, was a time of great intellectual and philosophical growth. However, it was not necessarily a period of leniency and punishment. During this time, public executions were still a common spectacle. Despite the growth in humanitarian philosophy, many believed that public executions served as a deterrent for potential criminals. The idea was to instill fear, to make the consequences of crime palpable and visible to all. And then there was the introduction of the guillotine. Invented by Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotin, it was ironically seen as a more humane method of execution. The swift fall of the blade promised a quick, painless death, a stark contrast to the drawn-out, torturous methods that had been commonplace, but one can hardly call a device designed for beheading humane, can they? As for the penal colonies, well, they were a unique form of punishment, to say the least. Criminals were shipped off to far-flung places like Australia to serve their sentences. The theory was that hard labor and isolation would reform the convicts. However, the reality was often much more brutal, with harsh conditions, grueling work, and a high mortality rate. So did the Enlightenment bring about a more enlightened approach to punishment? The answer is complex. While there was a shift in thought, moving towards a more systematic and humane approach to punishment, the methods used were still incredibly severe. The Enlightenment did not necessarily mean an end to harsh punishments. Despite the progress made during the Enlightenment, the 20th century brought new forms of punishment that were just as harsh, if not worse. As we delve further into the annals of history, we'll see how humanity grappled with the concept of punishment, and how our understanding of justice and retribution continues to evolve. In the modern age, one would hope that punishments have become more humane. But is this really the case? In the 21st century, we may have traded the rack and the gallows for the gavel and the prison cell, but have we truly moved beyond inhumane punishments? Let's explore. Consider the death penalty, a form of punishment that seems to be a relic of the past, yet persists in some parts of the world. This ultimate punishment, often administered through lethal injection or electric chair, is controversial, to say the least. While some argue that it serves as a deterrent, critics point out that it's irreversible and fraught with the risk of executing the innocent. Then, there's solitary confinement. Imagine being locked up in a room alone for 23 hours a day, with minimal human contact. Sounds like a scene from a horror movie, doesn't it? Yet it's a reality for thousands of inmates worldwide. Solitary confinement, originally conceived as a method of reform, has come under scrutiny for its psychological effects. The United Nations has even declared prolonged solitary confinement as a form of torture. In addition to physical punishments, we've seen a rise in psychological forms of punishment. Public shaming, for instance, has made a comeback in the digital age. With the click of a button, a person's mistake can be broadcast to the world, leading to a wave of online harassment and ridicule. This modern-day scarlet letter can lead to severe psychological distress and social ostracization. These modern punishments might lack the gruesome theatrics of their historical counterparts, but they can inflict deep, lasting damage. They prompt us to question, are we truly more humane in our approach to punishment, or have we merely traded one form of cruelty for another? As we've seen, the history of punishment is a dark and complex one. We've evolved from public executions to more concealed forms of punishment, yet the question remains, have we truly learned from our past, or are we doomed to repeat it? From ancient times to the modern age, punishments have served as a reflection of societal values and norms. Let us pause for a moment to reflect on this journey we have taken through the annals of punishment, a journey that has led us from the macabre theatrics of the medieval era to the cold, calculated methods of the modern age. In the dreadful beginnings, we saw the brutal physical punishments of ancient civilizations. The wheel, the rack, and the crucifixion were not just methods of punishment, but also tools of control, instilling fear and obedience in the populace. The medieval times were no less horrific. The Iron Maiden, the breaking wheel, and the pillory were prime examples of the era's twisted creativity. These punishments were not only physically tormenting, but also served to publicly humiliate the accused, upholding societal norms through fear and deterrence. The Enlightenment era, despite its name, was not entirely enlightened when it came to punishment. The guillotine, though quick and seemingly humane, was a spectacle of death that served as a stark reminder of the state's power over the individual. In the modern age, we have seen a shift from physical punishments to psychological ones. Solitary confinement, for instance, is a form of punishment that attacks the mind, pushing individuals to the brink of their sanity. It is a chilling reminder that physical pain is not the only way to punish. As we have journeyed through these epochs, we can see that punishment is not just about retribution or deterrence. It is a reflection of the society that imposes it, its values, its fears, and its norms. It is a mirror held up to the collective conscience of a civilization. In this reflection, we are encouraged to ponder upon our current methods of punishment. Are they just? Are they effective? Are they a reflection of who we are or who we aspire to be? As we progress into the future, these are questions we must grapple with. As we close this journey through the annals of punishment, one can only wonder, What does the future hold for the concept of punishment in our society?